трубу второй очереди. Справа блок центральный зал блока номер 4.
38 years ago, in the early hours of April 26, 1986, one of the most catastrophic disasters in the history of nuclear energy was set off by an improperly conducted experiment at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. But what actually happened during that night, and what consequences do we still bear because of that mistake? On this International Chernobyl Disaster Remembrance Day, join us for a trip throughout the day to that fateful hour, heroic actions, impacts, and aftermath that still echo today, and the lessons learned in that tragedy. The disaster of Chernobyl actually began late in the night during a safety test of reactor number 4. This test has been designed for simulating a power dropout and was in fact to verify if the reactor might safely be brought to shut down operation until that point when the power generators might become effective. However, both the flaws of the reactor's design and a mistake of an operator made this routine procedure an unimaginable nuclear reaction.
But let's look at what exactly happened at Chernobyl on April 26, 1986. The lead-up to the explosion actually started 24 hours earlier. The sequence of events started when the Russians began to shut down their reactor in preparation for an experiment, a test which was ironically aimed at improving the overall safety of the reactor. The idea was to disconnect one of the turbines from the reactor and find out if it was possible to use the energy from it as it slowed down to power some pumps which were part of the reactor's emergency cooling system. The Russians, of course, had been operating this type of reactor, known as an RBMK-1000, for some 20 years. In their official report, they admit that there were significant violations in the operating rules for the power station on this occasion. But in Vienna, they also acknowledged it had basic design faults. In their discussions with international experts, the Russians confirmed that their operators placed the reactor in an unstable condition and that the design placed too much responsibility on the operator's shoulders. So let's look at what happened in greater detail. The experiment which the Russians hoped to carry out should have been no more than a one-off, tried just once as the reactor shut down and lasting about 45 seconds. But in case it didn't work first time, it was decided to keep the reactor working at a reduced level. The operators planned to reduce the level from 3,200 megawatts to around 700 megawatts and keep it there so that they could repeat the experiment if necessary. Unfortunately, the operator in charge failed to set the controller, the thermostat if you like, at 700 and the level dropped to 30. This set the scene for disaster. It's forbidden to operate an RBMK at lower than 700 megawatts because the design limitations make the reactor unstable and potentially dangerous at a lower power level. Determined to press ahead with their experiment, the men in the control room sought to bring the reactor back up to power again, but it was very difficult. They got the heat output back up to 200, but couldn't get it higher. Even to get that far, they had to switch off vital safety systems and deliberately withdraw many of the control rods.
On the evening of 25th April, operators began preparing the test by lowering the power of the reactor. Miscommunication and deviation from the test protocol brought up a dangerous, unstable configuration of the reactor. At 1:23 a.m., the test began. Within several seconds after the signal was given, the reactor was blown away. A huge amount of radioactive materials were thrown out into the atmosphere. The explosion killed 2 workers of the plant immediately and exposed hundreds more to lethal radiation levels. Firemen were called to the scene, but they were completely unaware of the dangers imposed by radiation and fought the radioactive inferno through the night. In the following days, more than 49,000 people from Pripyat were evacuated by the government without telling them about the permanent displacement. The residents left so abruptly that today, the town stands frozen in time. Dolls still sit on the floor of kindergartens, dishes remain on the table, and family photos gather dust, untouched since that day. This ghost town embodies the sudden and permanent displacement of its former inhabitants.
The people arriving there for the first time didn't understand the danger, especially the firefighters, who initially thought they were extinguishing a regular fire. That's why they died within a week. We were well aware of the danger in what we were doing, but the soldiers were in a very bad situation. They worked in the most contaminated areas and did all the dirty work.
Ostretsov has himself suffered heart problems and cancer he blames on the radiation.
The Chernobyl accident was the most terrible accident ever to occur in the history of nuclear power plants. Grave consequences were brought to the human casualty and economic cost related to it. It released an enormous amount of radioactive isotopes, polluting the most part of Europe. It still remains one of the polluted zones around the reactor, with a 30-kilometer exclusion area around it. This accident left a huge impact on international nuclear safety and brought an extensive change to the policy and the design of the reactor. It is said that the legacy of Chernobyl underlines the fact that the nuclear energy is full of risk if safety is not on the highest level. The disaster has also influenced the development of international standards of nuclear safety in the field, not only for the design of reactor, but also in reaction to emergencies and preparedness for disaster. It is also a grim reminder of the indispensable requirement for continual improvement and vigilance in the nuclear industry. Today, Chernobyl stands not only as a touching memorial to human error and technological failure, but as a beacon of hope for safer, more responsible energy practices. Looking behind through history, let us look ahead at the future where such tragedy might never occur. This is the duty that includes restitution to the dead and protecting the future generations. If this video has enlightened you on the lessons of Chernobyl, please share it to spread awareness. Subscribe for more insights on how science and history continues to shape our world.